You know, a lot of people think that they know why the ANC lost the Western Cape, if they even had it at all. They say that it's because colored people are just racist or that they were trying to be white. But what if I told you that the real reasons were actually fear, exclusion, and broken promises? In my last video, I broke down how the NP used fear to win in 1994, and how colored voters, especially the working class, were persuaded. But that's just the beginning. Today, I want to go a little bit deeper, not just into how people voted, but why many of them gave up voting altogether. Once you see what seekings the author found in this paper, I don't think we can look at voting and elections in the same way again, or at least that we have a much better understanding of what happened in the Western Cape. Now, if you watched my last video, then you'll remember how the NP won over colored voters through fear. But here's something that we didn't fully explore. The idea that there was ever a single colored vote. So seeking shows that in 1993, over 50% of colored voters didn't even know who they were going to vote for. When the 1994 election came, working class coloreds, so those in poorer communities, overwhelmingly voted for the National Party. Middle class colored voters were a lot more split, with many of them leaning more towards the ANC. But across the board, the NP pushed fear-based messaging, warning that the ANC would bring chaos and that their homes and that their jobs would end up being taken. One example is that campaign messaging actually told colored residents that their homes wouldn't be safe under an ANC government, which is crazy coming from the NP. But it worked. Now, it's a mistake to think that the ANC lost the Western Cape because people switched parties. Seekings actually found that from 1994 to 2004, the actual number of ANC voters in the Western Cape didn't increase much. What did change is that the NP completely collapsed. In 1994, they had 655,000 voters. By 1996, that number dropped to 358,000 because voters who were undecided in 1993 but voted NP in 94 became largely uninterested in later elections. Most of those voters didn't join the ANC, they just stopped voting altogether. In fact, they actually found that only 7% of NP voters from 1994 voted for the ANC by 2004. But another big change was migration. Thousands of black South Africans moved to the Western Cape from the Eastern Cape after 1994. And these migrants, they were generally younger, from poorer communities, and they were more likely to support the ANC. So the ANC's growing share of votes didn't come from conversions. It came from demographic change. Now, Seekings tested out different models to try and figure out what explained voting patterns in the Western Cape. The first model was based on race only, and that he found explained about 88% of voter behavior. The second model was based on income. He found that explained about 66% of voter behavior. But the third one, when he put race and income levels together, explained 93% of voter behavior. So what that shows is that both identity and economic conditions shaped how people voted. For example, wealthier colored voters were more likely to vote for the ANC than those from poorer communities. But across all levels of income, fear of the ANC was a major influence. So the narrative that coloreds chose whiteness, it completely ignores the emotional weight of economic insecurity, the historical trauma, and also the targeted fear-mongering propaganda. Hey, quick pause here. If you are enjoying this video, please don't forget to like, and also more importantly, subscribe. My YouTube analytics is telling me that a lot of the people who watch my videos haven't subscribed yet. So please do that. It really helps my channel to grow. So like, subscribe, share the video, tell someone else to subscribe also. But I hope that you're enjoying this. Let's get back to the video. Now, what I want to do is I want to zoom in a little bit more on one of the bigger reasons why I feel colored communities felt like they were betrayed after 94, and that's the transformation of the public sector. In 1994, South Africa had to change the makeup of its government workforce. Under apartheid, public service jobs, especially senior positions, were almost entirely dominated by white South Africans. That's why we got the Employment Equity Act of 1998 to change that. The act introduced targets to ensure that black South Africans could access public service jobs, especially at senior levels. But here's the issue. Those national targets were not adjusted based on provincial demographics. For example, in a province like maybe Gauteng or Limpopo, where the majority population is black, setting a target of 75% black representation made sense. But in the Western Cape, where over 51% of the population was colored, those same targets felt ostracizing. Remember what I said about them just not voting at all after 94? This was a big part of the reason why. Now check this out. The Public Service Commission reported that the 50% target figure for black managers was revised upwards to 75% in 2005. Now that date is very interesting for me because in the very next provincial elections, the DA won the majority vote. Now I'm not saying that there's a direct link there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a strong contributing factor. Because while we are talking about the early 2000s and the late 1990s, even as recently as 2024 last year, official statistics show that colored South Africans still faced major barriers in the public service. According to an IOL report citing official stats, colored people only held 6.1% of top positions and 8.2% of senior management roles in the Western Cape. This point was raised by the chairperson of the CEE, the Commission of Employment Equity. In a province where colored people made up the majority, that is a staggering underrepresentation under a government that preached fair opportunity. And what was the result? We ended up with a generation of youth who grew up watching their parents stuck in the same job grades, the same job levels for decades. And when those same young people looked for job opportunities in the public sector themselves, they often felt like they were being blocked. And I have my own experience in that. Now, whether it was intentional or not, national redress policy created a disconnect between the national goal and the provincial lived reality in the Western Cape. This sense of exclusion was made worse in 2010 when Jimmy Manyi, who was then the director of General Labour, he publicly said that there was an oversupply or an overconcentration of colored people in the Western Cape. The DA capitalized on that moment. They issued out a pamphlet that was aimed directly at colored voters, saying the ANC wants to stop you from getting a job or a promotion. Now imagine growing up in the Cape Flats, working really hard, believing that this new democracy was going to bring change. But then instead you end up feeling ignored, cast out in what's meant to be that new democracy. The stuff becomes emotional, man. People didn't just vote out of politics. They voted out of pain, out of fear, out of anger. So this wasn't about rejecting blackness. It was about feeling and being rejected themselves. People felt invisible in a system that they helped to fight and to dismantle. But after 94, many of them felt like they were treated like just an afterthought. Now, I leave the question up to you guys. Was the ANC wrong? Were the voters wrong? The truth is, the NP used fear. The ANC made strategic errors. And this is where we are now because of it. But if you want to make a move forward, we have to be able to understand and tell these histories. No more stereotypes. Understand and see the bigger picture. Now, if you found that this video was informative, if you feel like maybe it reminded you of a story from your own family in the Western Cape, please leave a comment below, share this video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss another. See you guys in the next video.